Welcome to the sovereign system, the only place where we don't just analyze the system, we architect a way out. Are you tired of being told you're a component, a mere cog in a machine you don't understand? We reject the idea that your only goal is to survive the chaos. Our purpose is to become sovereign, that is, fully decoupled, resilient, and in command of your own life. Each week, we use a powerful 360-degree framework combining Terence McKenna's novelty theory, occult history, material sciences, and the intentional change model to cut through the noise and reveal the forces shaping your reality. I'm Dave, one of your hosts. While I often dive deep into galaxy brain complex systems, my co-host John ensures I stay grounded and focused on practical, real-world steps.
That's right, Dave. My job is to be the street level translator. I make sure that everything we discuss, from the massive novelty spikes to the four quadrants of reality, is immediately actionable in your day to day life. We're here to build the bridge between the grand geopolitical chess game and the health of your mind, body, and bank account.
Not only bank account, but also your soul. But let's dive in. This is the sovereign system.
In this episode, we're going full combat mode on the single biggest disease in modern leadership, the refusal to own the outcome. We're using Jocko, Willink, and Leif Babin's extreme ownership to show you why the most powerful words in any language are 3 syllables long. This is mine. Coming up in this episode, our novelty spike this week: Boeing, the company that has been making headlines for years with safety failures, whistleblower suppression, and death, and a corporate culture that Harvard just called a masterclass in ethical leadership failure. We're going to show you why Boeing is the anti-Jocko, a multi-billion-dollar case study in what happens when nobody owns the problem. Then the deep dive, the 4 quadrants of accountability void. We're using the AQAL framework to show how the refusal to take ownership operates at every level, from your inner narrative to your physical habits to the culture around you to the systems that profit from your passivity. The sovereign breakthrough this week: the ownership transfer. We're giving you the protocol for converting every complaint, every excuse, and every blame into a personal action item. This is the move that turns the passive patient into the active architect. And finally, your sovereign win, the blame ledger, a 7-day exercise to catch yourself in the act of outsourcing responsibility and take it back.
I already feel like I need to do some push ups, Dave. Let's recap last week's first.
Okay, quick recap, architects. Last week we dove into Brene Brown's Dare to Lead and the concept of the armor trap. We showed you that shields we wear to avoid vulnerability, perfectionism, numbing, foreboding joy are the exact things keeping us disconnected from real power.
Right, and our novelty spike was the Air Canada CEO who literally lost his job because he chose the armor of a polished English only video over the vulnerability of stumbling through French for the families of 2 dead pilots. Door 2, emotionally bankrupt, career over.
That's right, John. And the sovereign win was the armor audit, tracking your own armor moments, naming the feeling underneath, and calculating the cost. If you did that exercise, you now have data on exactly how much your armor is charging you every day.
And if you didn't do it, well, that's actually a perfect transition into this week because the number one reason people skip the homework, they blame something. I was too busy. I forgot. The week was crazy. Notice what all of those have in common. Not one of them starts with I choose. This week we fix that. Let's hit that novelty spike.
All right, architects. This week's novelty spike is Boeing. And I know what you're thinking. Boeing again? Well, yes, because Boeing isn't just a news story anymore. It's a case study that keeps writing new chapters in the textbook of failed accountability. This week, Harvard's program on negotiation published a detailed analysis of Boeing's ethical leadership failures, and the findings are absolutely devastating.
Lay it out for me, Dave. What's the highlight reel of catastrophe?
Okay, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 crashes, killing 189 people. 2019, Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 crashes, killing another 157 people, both linked to a faulty flight system called MCAS that Boeing knew had problems. Then in 2024, a fuselage panel literally blows off a 737 MAX mid-flight. Same year, Boeing's Starliner space capsule strands two astronauts in orbit. And of this week, April 2026, Boeing is still dealing with production pauses, certification delays, and an FAA that publicly called their safety culture broken.
Dave, I'm sorry. A door fell off a plane, like just popped off? That's not a safety issue, Dave. That's a metaphor. That's the universe going, hey, your accountability just blew out at 30,000 feet and everybody can see that hole.
And here's what the Harvard analysis pinpoints. The researchers identified the core issue not as incompetence, but as cognitive bias. They cite Moore and Bazerman, who wrote that in setting goals for the 737 MAX, Boeing behaved as if speed to market was the only metric. They set stretch goals so narrowly focused on timelines that safety literally faded from view. The FAA enabled it by allowing Boeing to self-certify its own aircraft.
Oh, wait a minute. Boeing was allowed to grade its own homework? That's like letting the fox run the henhouse inspection service and the chicken restaurant. But here's what makes this a novelty spike for our framework, Dave. Look at the pattern. After every single crisis, what does Boeing say? Whatever final conclusions are reached, Boeing is accountable for what happens.
That's a direct quote from their CEO.
Right? Boeing is accountable. Sounds great. Very official, very corporate. But let me translate that into Jocko Wilkins' language, an extreme ownership. Jocko would say that that statement is the exact opposite of ownership, because real ownership doesn't say we are accountable for what happened. Real ownership says I failed. Here is exactly how, here's what I'm changing, and here's what you can hold me to. Boeing keeps issuing press releases about accountability while the FAA finds workers who are afraid to report safety issues. The Harvard report says engineers were fearful of voicing concerns to management. There's a disconnect between what leadership says about safety and what the assembly workers actually experience.
And that's the accountability void. It's not that Boeing doesn't use the word accountability. They use it constantly. It's that they've confused saying the word with practicing the principle. It's like saying, I'm on a diet while eating a cheeseburger. The word is there, the behavior isn't.
And that, architects, is why we're dedicating an entire episode to extreme ownership. Because accountability isn't a press release, it's not a corporate statement, it's not a training module you force people to click through. It's a way of being. It's a decision you make before the crisis, not after the cameras show up. Boeing had 20 years of chances to own the problem. 20 years! And every single time they choose the press release over the practice. Jocko Wilkin would say there are no bad teams, only bad leaders. Boeing has had a lot of leaders, and the problem hasn't changed. That tells you everything you need to know. Dave, give us the overview for anyone who hasn't read Extreme Ownership, and if you haven't, seriously, go get it. What's the big idea?
All right, thanks, John. So Jocko Wilkins is a retired Navy SEAL commander. He led Task Unit Bruiser in the Battle of Ramadi in Iraq, the most decorated special operations unit of the Iraqi war. And the book he co-wrote with his fellow SEAL officer, Leif Babin, distills the leadership principles they learned in combat into a framework that applies everywhere: business, relationships, parenting, personal growth. The core thesis is in the title. Extreme ownership means that the leader is responsible for everything in their world. No excuses, no blame. If the mission fails, it's the leader's fault, period. Even if a subordinate made the mistake, the leader failed to train them, failed to communicate clearly, or failed to put them in a position to succeed.
I love how radical that sounds because we live in a culture where the default setting is find someone else to blame. Your project failed? Bad team. Your marriage is struggling? Bad partner. Your health is declining? bad genetics, bad luck, bad economy. Jocko comes along and says, nope, all of that is yours. All of it. And the wild thing is, that's not depressing, that's liberating because it's all my fault. Then I have all the power to fix it.
Yep, John. You see, that's the paradox at the heart of the book. Wilcock and Babin identify several key principles. The first one is extreme ownership itself. The leader owns everything. The second is no bad teams, only bad leaders. Performance is a reflection of leadership, not talent. The third is believe. The leader must genuinely believe in the mission to inspire others. The fourth is check the ego. Ego clouds judgment and prevents honest assessments. Then we move into the laws of combat, cover and move, teamwork. Simple. Keep plans clear, prioritize and execute. Handle one problem at a time. And my favorite, John, decentralized command. Empower people at every level to lead.
Decentralized command. That's the one that gets me because here's the thing, extreme ownership is not about being a control freak. It's actually the opposite. When you truly own the outcome, you have to empower the people around you. You have to trust them. You have to give them the tools and the authority to make decisions. The control freak says, everything goes through me. The extreme owner says, I've trained you, I've given you the mission, I trust you to execute. And if it goes wrong, that's still on me. Big difference, massive difference.
And the book opens with one of the most powerful leadership stories I have ever read. Jocko describes a friendly fire incident in Ramdani, where one of his own men was shot by allied Iraqi soldiers, and the whole situation nearly cascaded into an all-out fratricide. When the debrief happened, his superiors were looking for someone to blame, and Jocko stood up and said three words: "It was me." He took full responsibility, even though the fog of war, miscommunications, and multiple teams all contributed. He said, I was the commander. The failure is mine. And instead of being punished, his superiors respected him more because real ownership creates trust.
Meanwhile, at Boeing, after 346 people died in two crashes, the CEO said, and again, I'm paraphrasing, Boeing is accountable. Not I failed, not here's exactly what I'm changing today, a vague corporate third person non apology. Jocko would have walked into that press conference and said, I am the leader. This happened on my watch. I did not ensure the safety culture was strong enough. I did not listen to the engineers who raised concerns. That's my fault, and here's exactly what I'm doing about it. Starting right now, same situation, radically different ownership, radically different outcome.
Yep, John, which brings us to the deep dive. Let's take these principles and apply them across all four quadrants.
Quadrant 1, the inner worlds. All right, let me paint you a picture. You wake up on Monday morning, the alarm goes off, and your first thought before your feet even hit the floor is a story, and that story goes something like this. I'm exhausted because work is insane. I'm broke because the economy sucks. I'm stressed because my boss is a nightmare. I'm out of shape because I don't have time. Notice something? Every single one of those stories has a villain, and it's never you. It's the job, the economy, the boss, the schedule. You're the victim in every narrative, and that victim story, that's the most comfortable armor in the world. Because if the problem is out there, then you don't have to do anything. You just have to suffer nobly and complain to your friends. But here's what Jocko would say to you. And he'd say it at 4:30 in the morning while he's already done a workout that would make a Greek god cry. Rewrite the story, put yourself in the driver's seat. I'm exhausted because I choose not to set boundaries at work. I'm broke because I choose spending patterns I haven't audited. I'm stressed because I choose not to have the hard conversation with my boss. I'm out of shape because I choose the couch over the gym. That couch is comfy, but we'll get out of that. Same facts, totally different power dynamic. Version 1, you're a leaf in the wind. Version 2, you're the architect of a building that needs renovation. Same building, but now you have the blueprints and the hard hat.
Yeah, exactly. What John just described concept maps directly to what psychologists call the locus of control, a concept from Julia Roter's research in 1966. Individuals with an external locus of control believe that outcomes are determined by outside forces, luck, fate, other people, the system. Those with an internal locus of control believe their actions directly shape their outcomes. The research is overwhelming. People with an internal locus of control show higher achievement, better health outcomes, lower anxiety, greater resilience, and critically, higher income over time. Extreme ownership is essentially a combat tested protocol from shifting your locus of control from external to internal. And when you do that, your brain literally changes. You activate the prefrontal cortex, the planning, decision making center, instead of the amygdala, the panic button.
So, the science is saying the moment you stop blaming and start owning, your brain switches from a survival mode to architect mode. You go from things are happening to me to I am happening to things. Architects, that shift, that one shift is the entire game. Everything else we've talked about on this podcast flows from it.
All right, let's jump into quadrant two, the physical world. Now let's look at the observable behavior ownership versus blame. Wilcock and Babin document specific measurable differences between leaders who practice extreme ownership and those who don't. Ownership leaders, they debrief after every operation. They ask, what could I have done better, before asking what anyone else could have done. They communicate the why behind every directive. They push decision-making authority down to the lowest capable individual or level. Now, blame leaders, on the other hand, they conduct post-mortems to find fault. They communicate directives without context. They centralize decision-making to maintain control. And critically, they create environments where subordinates are afraid to report problems.
Boeing. That FAA expert panel found that assembly workers were afraid of retaliation from reporting safety issues. The Harvard report says that there was a disconnect between senior management and the people actually building the planes. That's not a safety problem. That's a leadership problem. If your people are afraid to tell you the truth, you created that fear. You created it by punishing honesty, by rewarding silence, by making the messenger pay for the message. Jocko would say if your team isn't telling you the problems, that's not their failure, that's your failure. You haven't built the trust, you haven't created the safety, you haven't earned the truth.
And the behavioral data backs this up. Gallup published research just weeks ago, actually, March 2026, showing that creating accountability is the lowest rated competency among leaders. Less than half of the leaders rated themselves as outstanding at it, and managers rate their leaders even lower. The data shows that when leaders do practice clear accountability, their employees are 3 times more likely to be engaged.
3 times, Dave. So the Gallup data isn't literally saying if you just own the outcome clearly, consistently, visibly, your team's engagement triples. 3 times more engaged, 3 times more productive, 3 times more loyal. And most leaders are leaving that on the table because owning things is uncomfortable. It's easier to blame the market, blame the team, blame that supply chain. But easy is expensive. Boeing can tell you exactly how expensive.
Exactly. A very expensive lesson to keep learning after all this time. Let's take quadrant 3 next, which is the collective inner world, and I'm passing it back to you, John.
Now, here's where this gets spicy for our framework. When one person refuses to own their life, they suffer quietly. When an entire culture refuses to own anything, you get an egregore of blame, a collective thought form where the default response to any problem is, whose fault is this? Instead of, how do we fix this? And we live in this egregore right now. Look at the social media. Look at the politics. Look at corporate culture. The first response to every crisis is, find the villain. Find the person to cancel. Find the department to restructure. Find the scapegoat. Nobody says, how did we create the conditions for this? Nobody says, what's my piece of this? Because in the blame, egregore, personal ownership is social suicide. If you own the problem, you become the target.
Wilcock addresses this directly, actually. He writes about how the SEAL teams, the culture of extreme ownership has to be built from the top down and modeled consistently. The leader goes first. When the commander says that was my fault, it gives permission to everyone else to own their piece without fear. But in blame cultures, and Boeing is the textbook example of this, the opposite happens. When the CEO uses vague corporate language about accountability, it signals to everyone in the organization, we're not really owning this. We're managing the narrative. And if the top isn't really owning it, why would the assembly workers risk their job to report a problem?
The culture of blame is a prison. Architects, and here's the cruel irony. The people inside it think they're protecting themselves by pointing fingers, but they're actually building the walls of their own cage. Every time you blame someone else, you give away a piece of your power. You're saying, I can't fix this because they caused it. Every time you own something, you take power back. I contributed to this, and I can change my contribution. That's the sovereign move. That's the architect's blueprint.
Yeah, John. Awesome stuff here. So let's move on to quadrant four, the collective exterior world. So zooming all the way out, the systemic structure actively discourages extreme ownership. Think about how our legal system works. The first rule of corporate crisis management is don't admit fault. Lawyers advise against it. Insurance policies penalize it. Public relations firms craft statements specifically designed to sound accountable while admitting nothing. Boeing's pattern is not unique in any way. It's the standard operating procedure for every Fortune 500 company in crisis. The system is literally designed to prevent the Jocko response. It was me is a legal liability. We are committed to doing better is legally safe. And so the system optimizes for legal safety at the expense of cultural trust.
And that is the systemic trap. That system has made it more expensive to be honest than to be evasive. It's cheaper legally to issue a vague statement than to say, I failed. But here's what the system doesn't calculate: the long term cost of trust erosion. Boeing stock has been declining for years. Their on time performance is near the bottom of the industry. Their best engineers are leaving. The FAA has increased oversight to levels usually reserved for companies on the edge of shutdown. The system saved Boeing from a few lawsuits, but it cost them something far more valuable: the belief from employees, customers, regulators, and the public that Boeing actually means what it says. That's a bankruptcy of trust, and no press release can bail you out of that one, Dave.
Yep. Willink would say the short-term comfort of blame always produces long-term catastrophe, and the short-term discomfort of ownership always produces long-term trust. The math is simple, the execution is hard, but the equation never changes.
Which is why this podcast exists. We're building a community that runs on a different equation. Where I messed up is met with, what did you learn? Instead of gotcha. Where ownership is the currency, not blame. That's the sovereign system. That's the architect's world.
Yep. All right, architects. The sovereign breakthrough this week is what we're calling the ownership transfer. This is the practical protocol for converting any complaint, excuse, or blame into a personal action item.
I love this because it's so simple. It almost feels stupid. And the things that feel stupid simple are usually the ones that change your life. Here's how it works. Whenever you catch yourself saying or thinking a blame statement, my boss didn't give me clear direction, or the traffic made me late, or my partner never listens, you run the ownership transfer. 3 steps. Step 1: catch the blame. Just notice it. Don't judge yourself, just flag it. Oh, I'm blaming right now. Step 2: find your 2%. Jocko says even in situations when someone else is 98% at fault, you still own your 2%. Maybe the traffic was horrible, but you chose to leave at that time. Maybe your boss gave terrible direction, but you chose not to ask clarifying questions. Find your piece even if it's tiny. Step 3: write the action. Convert your 2% into a specific thing you can do. Not, I'll try harder, a concrete behavioral action. Next time I leave 15 minutes earlier. Next meeting, I ask my boss to clarify the top 3 priorities before I leave the room. Tonight, I tell my partner, the story I'm making up is that you're not listening. Can we talk about that? See, what we just did there, we smuggled in last week's Rumble. The story I'm making up from Brene Brown plus find your 2% from Jocko equals a complete sovereign communication. You're vulnerable and you're owning it. That's the stack, architects. Vulnerability plus ownership. Brown plus Willink. That's how you built.
And neuroscience supports this. When you shift from blame to ownership, you activate the anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region associated with error detection and behavioral adaptation. Blame shuts this region down. Ownership turns it on. You literally become a better problem solver the moment you own them.
The ownership transfer. 3 steps. Catch the blame, find your 2%, write the action. Do it once today, then do it again tomorrow. By day 7, it becomes a reflex, and that reflex, that's the difference between a patient and an architect.
Yep, absolutely, John. That's some good stuff. Let's wrap this up. We're gonna actually, we're hitting our sovereign win. We're calling this the blame ledger. So architects' homework time this week's sovereign win is the blame ledger, and it's designed to make the invisible visible.
Here's the deal. Most of us have no idea how much we blame. It's like breathing. You do it all day, every day, and you never notice. The blame ledger forces you to notice.
Over the next 7 days, carry a small notebook or use the Notes app on your phone. Every time you catch yourself blaming, complaining, or making an excuse, write it down. Here's the format. Column 1, the blame statement. Exactly what you said or thought. This meeting is a waste of time. My kid never listens. The gym is too crowded. Column 2, my 2%. What's your piece? I didn't set an agenda for the meeting. I haven't got on my kid's level and asked what's going on. I have always gone at peak hours instead of adjusting my schedule. Column 3, the transfer action. One specific concrete behavior you can change. Send an agenda 24 hours before every meeting. Sit with my kid for 10 minutes tonight and just listen. Set an alarm for 30 minutes earlier and then go before work.
Here's the prediction. I'll bet you another batch of artisanal pickles. By day 3, you're going to be shocked at how many times a day you blame. I'm talking double digits. 15, 20 blame moments a day. Little ones, big ones, and everything in between. The traffic, the weather, the news, your coworker's annoying email signature, and by day 7, you're going to have a ledger full of concrete actions you can take to improve your life. Not theories, not affirmations, actions. That's the power of the blame ledger. It turns your complaints into a to-do list.
And the advanced challenge for the architects who want the extra credit, pick one blame from your ledger that involves another person and do the ownership transfer out loud to their face. Use the Rumble language. The story I'm making up is X. My piece of this is Y. And here's what I'm doing to change. Here's how I'm committing to change. Now, with that combination, vulnerability from Brown, ownership from Wilcock, is the most powerful communication tool we've given you on this podcast to date. Please, guys, architects out there, use it.
And share your ledger with the Sovereign System community. Post your biggest blame, your 2%, and your action. Let's hold each other accountable, because that's what a real community does. Not in a punishing way, in a we see you doing the work and we are right there with you way.
Yeah, no, absolutely, John. And I think that's like a big thing because we're like, you look at everything that we've talked about, right? Where everything is literally designed against having this kind of mindset, right? And, we talked about Carol Dweck, we talked about Brene Brown, now we're talking about Jocko, Willink. These are all different leaders in various different fields, and they're all vastly different, right? But when we kind of combine these frameworks and we look at it from a solid sovereign perspective, if you will, you realize that all of these, attributes and frameworks kind of stack. That when you start using them together, wonderful things begin to happen. Reality starts to shift. You become, freer. You care less about the things that you thought you cared about, and you realize what's really important. Now, of course, I would never suggest doing any of this if I haven't personally experienced the, transformational and powerful change that some of these frameworks, have. And so my story for this week is when back in my early 20s, when I had one of my first businesses. Um, I wasn't very good at paying rent on time. I was a problem child. I don't really know what I was thinking, but my landlord was more of a tolerant of me opposed to liking me, and you'd often call me up saying, Dave, where's the rent? And but like it would be only like a day or two late. But I understand he's just doing his job, and that's totally fine. And then one day I had read this book, Extreme Ownership. And I happened to be at Disney World at the time, and I will never forget this because this is where I realized, oh crap, like this stuff actually works. And I get a call from the landlord, and I'm surprised, it was early. He was early. Normally I think it was like due on the 15th of the month, and this was like the 13th or something like that. So I was like, what the hell, like why is this dude calling me? Especially because I'm in Florida, yada yada yada. And so, he's asking for the rent, and, I was like, and I could tell he was angry. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna flip the script, right? I'm gonna use Jocko's, framework here. And I said, Jack, his name was Jack. I'm like, you know what, Jack, you're right. And I'm sorry. I should have went down and paid the rent before I left for Florida. And from now on, I was basically not aware that this is the date that you were expecting it. Like this entire time, I thought it was the other date, the 15th. But in reality, I learned during this conversation it was the 13th, which is why he was so angry all the time. So, um, that was the first time his attitude changed towards me. That was the first time I felt like he actually saw me, and he immediately calmed down when I took ownership of the problem and I said, "Hey, this was on me." And in the back of my head I was like, "Oh crap, like what just happened?" Like this actually worked. This is like a Jedi mind trick. It's like this was so bizarre because I'd known this guy for years. And it was like a light switch had flipped or something like that. And when I took accountability, almost immediately trust was earned and you could feel it. It was palpable. So this stuff, guys, is very, very powerful. It's just, you know, not a lot of people aren't aware of it, right? I talk to people all the time. Mentor people all the time in various different areas. And when we kind of bring up some of these frameworks and stuff, they're like, wait, what? This exists? I'm like, yes, it's all proven. We've got empirical data like stating that this is fact. And, it's about getting it out there now. It's about kind of letting our community, even though we're small right now, which is totally fine, we'll get bigger, you know, um, just letting them know that we're here to give them the tools that they need to succeed, regardless of what they face out there, you know, because they have us. We were a community, right? I've talked so much, John, during this segment, so I'm going to hand it over to you. You can take us out, or you could talk about something that's relevant, but I'm totally off script here, and that's totally cool.
Dave, that was a great story. I mean, that you really kind of showed us, everything kind of coming together, right? Taking exactly what we're trying to teach here, putting it into use in everyday life, and seeing the results firsthand. And every day I'm asking myself those same questions. I'm asking myself, where am I, not failing, but where am I, instead of taking ownership, or not taking ownership, I have to own this. I have to own these failures. I have to own these mistakes. And then to correct the situation moving forward so these failures and these things don't happen again. That it's funny. I've worked at my job for so many years, and they keep changing things, and you're always blaming change as a reason for why you can't do certain things at your job. But then you ask yourself, why do I keep blaming change? I gotta own it. I gotta accept that this is the way this is going, and then use that to my advantage, and then ask questions about things I don't know. It,
Yeah, no, I 100% John, and I think this is important for people to realize. But before you bring us out here, I just wanted to comment. I was just thinking about it. It seems like a lot of what the current system is trying to outsource your power, right? You look at how everything is built, all of these, systems and subsystems in our society. Um, Everything we've talked about literally is about taking that power back, and it's kind of crazy where we've touched upon a lot of different topics at this point. But it all kind of comes back to that central theme where it's like you are controlled and you are not free, but you can be, right? You just need to learn how to be. And I think that's kind of more or less our goal here with this. So back to you, man. Why don't you take us out?
100% Dave, I agree 100% with that. Until then, architects, check the blame, find your 2%, write the action, and remember, the only person who can free you from the blame cage is the one looking back at you in the mirror. Own it, all of it. That's how architects build. See you next week.